I have kept the recitation chamber for 11 years. I know its sounds, the low harmonic of the drive coils below the deck plates, the soft chime of the atmospheric monitors at the half hour, the click of the porthole seal when the hull flexes in transit. I know it well enough to notice when something has gone wrong before the fault boards say so. The drive coils went silent at the 4th hour of the passage watch. Not a sputter, not a gradual wind down. They simply stopped. One moment, the big Ardennes Solace was underway, carrying 417 pilgrims and clergy to the conclave at the 3rd waypoint. The next moment, we were adrift in a system with no name on our charts, the lights cycling to emergency amber, and Elder Deacon Hevris hammering on the door to my chamber with the controlled urgency of a man who knows panic is a luxury he cannot afford. The damage was not catastrophic. That is what I told the pilgrims, and it was not a lie. The primary drive actuator had sheared on a stress fracture, the maintenance logs had flagged twice, and the Port Authority had twice signed off as acceptable. We had steerage. We had life support. We had, by the engineering team's estimate, 11 days of reserve power before the atmospheric processors began failing in sequence. What we did not have was a functioning long-range transmitter. The same fracture that killed the drive had severed the primary comm array coupling at the base of the relay mast. The backup transmitter had range enough to reach a system buoy if one had been near. There was no system buoy. Elder Hevris came to me that evening. The artificial evening the ship's clock still maintained out of habit, the amber emergency light making his gray vestments look like hammered copper, and he asked me what I intended to do. I told him I intended to transmit the hymn of last passage. He was quiet for a moment. The hymn of last passage is not a casual signal. It is the petition that the faithful send when all secular remedies have been exhausted. It is beamed on the Theological Frequency, the sacred band used exclusively by the Undying Network, the relay chain maintained by our recitation keepers across 11 systems. The hymn carries a distress signature embedded in its harmonic structure, designed to be read by the automated relay stations of the network, and forwarded to the nearest theological response vessel. It is, functionally, a prayer with a technical chassis. The recitation chamber has its own transmitter, older than the ship's systems, separately powered, independently cabled. It was built to function precisely when everything else had failed. I powered it up while Hevris watched, and I ran the diagnostic, and the diagnostic returned green. And I keyed in the theological frequency from memory. I could recite it in my sleep, have recited it in training 100 times, know its 11 decimal places, like the cadence of a well-worn liturgy. I began the transmission. The hymn of last passage takes 47 minutes to transmit in full. I sat in the chamber and I held the form, and when it was finished, I logged the timestamp and the frequency, and the transmission power, and I noted in the log that the signal had been aimed at the theological relay of the Undying, at bearing 347 by 12, and I closed the log and went to tell Elder Hevris that the prayer had been sent. He asked me how long the network would take to respond. I told him the standard response window was between 30 and 50 hours, depending on which relay received the signal first. He nodded and went to speak with the pilgrims. I returned to the chamber and waited. I did not expect what docked at the port airlock 19 hours later. I heard it before the airlock board registered it. A gentle, mechanical knock, repeated 3 times, rhythmic and unhurried. The kind of knock a device makes when its docking collar is seeking confirmation of seal integrity. Not the knock of a crew, not the knock of a person. Something automated. The airlock board showed an external contact. Hull dimensions, small. Configuration, single unit autonomous transit drone, cargo class. Registration prefix, unknown to our archive. The prefix was 3 letters followed by a numeral string, and the letters were not from any faction script I recognized. I brought the engineering team's senior member, a woman named Cesic, to the airlock with me. Cesic looked at the registration prefix on the board for a long moment without speaking. Then she said, "Those letters are in Earth Cargo Service notation." I asked her to repeat that. She repeated it. We opened the airlock. The drone was perhaps the length of 2 crew members standing end to end, a compact rectangular chassis with manipulator arms folded flat against its sides, a cargo bay occupying most of its body, and no crew space of any kind. No life support, no cockpit. It was a machine that moved cargo from one place to another without being asked twice, and it had found our airlock without anyone guiding it in, and it sat in our docking collar as placidly as a package left at a threshold. Its cargo bay opened without prompting. Inside, 48 medical compress packs, rated for our atmospheric chemistry. I checked the labeling and checked it again, because the labeling was accurate. The oxygen tolerance range matched our crew's biology precisely. 4 atmospheric hull seal patches, the flexible polymer kind used for stress fracture breaches, and a portable power cell, a large one, its output rating printed on the side in 3 different notation systems. I checked the third notation system. It matched our reactor's input class. Cesic stood very still. Then she crouched and looked at the power cell's coupling interface, and she stood up, and she said, "That fits our emergency coupling port." I said I understood that. She said, "This drone came prepared for us specifically." I said I understood that also. We unloaded the cargo in silence, the 2 of us, and 2 of the pilgrims who had followed us to the airlock out of the same quiet animal, need to understand what was happening. When the bay was empty, the drone retracted its collar, sealed the airlock interface, and departed. No acknowledgement, no signal. It simply left, as if it had completed an entry on a task list, and moved to the next item. I went back to the recitation chamber. I sat at the console. I pulled up the transmission log and the theological frequency specification, and I read through the 11 decimal places I had entered from memory, and I found what I had done. The theological frequency of the Undying Network sits at a very specific point in the communications band. I had entered 11 decimal places correctly. The 11th decimal place, the last one, the narrowest digit, the one that moves the frequency by an amount so small it carries no practical meaning in most transmission contexts, I had entered as a 7. The correct value is a 9. The frequency I had actually transmitted on sits 11 decimal places away from the theological frequency, in a band I had no registry entry for in our system archive. When I queried the error through the ship's partial communication database, it returned a single result, flagged as a legacy entry, the old Terran Chapel response band, decommissioned from active use by Earth's Theological Aid Commission approximately 200 years prior, at which point the band had been handed off to an automated monitoring relay and a courier dispatch system that was supposed to have been wound down in the subsequent budget cycle. It had not been wound down. The relay was still listening. When the hymn of last passage arrived on that frequency, the wrong frequency, the human one, the one that belonged to a network 200 years out of date, the relay's automated system had parsed the embedded distress signature in the hymn's harmonic structure. It had logged a distress event. It had queried its supply manifest. It had dispatched the nearest available courier drone with the closest available match to the distress profile. It had done this without asking anyone, without any human being reviewing the request or authorizing a response. It had done this because that is what it was built to do, and no one had told it to stop. I sat with that for a while. The pilgrims received the power cell's output through the emergency coupling within the hour. The atmospheric processors stabilized. The theological response vessel from the actual network arrived 26 hours later, the standard response time, well within the window, exactly as I had told Elder Heverus to expect. The rescue team expressed mild professional curiosity about the courier drone docking notation in the airlock log and asked me to explain it. I gave them the full account. The team's senior chaplain, a composed and precise woman named Orith, listened without expression, then noted it in her incident summary as an equipment anomaly, and moved on. I filed my own report. I filed it honestly, because the recitation records require it. In the summary field, I wrote, "The hymn was aimed at our gods. An Earth relay was listening on the wrong frequency. An Earth machine arrived 19 hours before our gods did. It brought exactly what we needed and required no worship in return. I do not know what to make of that theologically. I am recording it procedurally, because that is what the record requires, and because the power cell is still running, and the compress packs are still stocked in the medical bay, and the hull patch is still holding at frame 7, and all of that is real, regardless of what name we give to the thing that sent them. I keep the recitation chamber. I know it sounds. The drive coils are running again. I have corrected the decimal.